time for first and 45. First 45, identifying social determinants contributing to the homicide epidemic, killing black males before the age of 45. For the next hour, get into the game here on 99.5 FM and all of these social platforms. Share with others as we get into the game. Here is Pastor Drew Davis with First and 45.
Good evening and welcome to the show tonight. Got a little bit different shakeup tonight. The coach is left the building. He is out ministering in Stuttgart tonight. There's been a lot of violence. He's out there talking, praying, and as Bishop says, he is preaching tonight to the city of Stuttgart, talking about exactly what we're talking about here on the show. But don't fear, we got some guys that want to talk about some things. And we're not going to let you down. We got three guys. We got a crowd in the place tonight. But we're not going to let you down. So Bishop, you might just open up a prayer, especially for the coach. He's taking the word out tonight.
Absolutely. Kind down, we are just grateful for life itself and the opportunity that you give us to serve on a daily basis. We pray God for our time tonight. We just pray that as we share, that we can equip and empower our community, listeners, viewers, that for the greater good, to help to save the lives of others. So we're praying and looking at the coach tonight, let him represent your kingdom well. Let his voice be a voice transforming. To be glorified. We thank you for the victory. In Jesus' name, amen.
It's always like to talk about the lie. Why we do it, we talk about it. It's about the hungry. 44 million people in the U.S. are facing hunger. Arkansas is ranked the hungriest state in America, and especially now that school's out, the problem just gets larger. It's about the United States having the world's highest rate of children living in single-parent households. This is the widow. This is the single mom trying to make it all work. We got to be out there for. It's about the orphan. 391,000 children in the U.S. living in the foster care system, nearly 4,000 of them right here in Arkansas. And for a child aging out of the foster care system, 80% will have a child will have a child or be in prison within 2 years. 65% of them will experience homelessness. It's about the fact that we have 38 million Americans living in poverty, the majority of them being children of color. Right here in Arkansas, we have 17,000 kids who were identified by our schools this past year as homeless. It's about addiction. Half of people over 12 have used illicit drugs, and over 40,000 people die in the U.S. every year from overdosing. It's about the U.S. leading the world in the total number of incarcerations with more than 2 million people behind bars. At Every Arkansan, our vision is to see more people chasing their God-given dreams, and far too often those dreams are sidelined because of the zip code you were born in more than anything else. And so we're blessed to be able to host First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill, because all these facts I just mentioned are contributing factors to the one factor we have to change. The number one cause of death for a black male 0 to 44 is homicide, not car accidents, not cancer, not heart disease. And like I said earlier, we got a little bit different show tonight. Coach is out. And so we're going to be talking about how we can combat some of our violence problems by attacking the addiction problems in our country and in our state. And you already heard me talk about how more than half the population over 12 has tried illicit drugs. 84% of our population has consumed alcohol. And I recently shared a video with Blake, who's here with us tonight, Pastor Ed Young Jr., and he says that 1 out of 10 people who drink alcohol become problem drinkers. Alcohol lies to us. It takes us by the hand. Everything is cool. Have another here, have another. But what if I told you that I'm opening a brand new airline and 1 out of every 10 flights is going to crash? How many people are going to sign up for my super cheap airline? Bishop, you want to hop on that airline? Nope. He's shaking his head. Nope. You don't want on that. You don't want that 1 in 10 chance. Proverbs 23 says, in the end, it's like a snake and poisons like a viper. This is talking about when we open ourselves up to alcohol in particular, but we're also talking about drugs. It's only a matter of time before that snake bites you or someone else. And so we've got 3 special guests with us tonight who were bit by that snake. I mean, is that a good way of saying it, Blake?
Yeah, that's a great way. We definitely tried it out, and it did not work. We were one of the 10. So
one of the 10. So we've got Blake Polston, who heads up Every Arkansan Recovery, is a fixture around the state when it comes to recovery and talking about what God did in his life and what's going on. Blake, why don't we just kind of get started? You sharing your story, and then we're gonna hit all these other guys here as we go.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, I tried drugs for about 15 years and it didn't really work out for me. Led to incarceration. And that's whenever I decided to give my life to Christ, and it worked a lot better. I think about how that pastor mentioned that about 1 out of 10, and it's just a lottery ticket that not many people would scratch if they actually knew the data. But what ends up happening is teenagers. It's teenagers that it happens at a young age, and they end up falling into the lifestyle. And then one thing leads to another. And then after you start experimenting with drugs or, marijuana or alcohol or whatever substance that you decide that you're going to try at a young age, well, then naturally you start putting yourself in places in which that other things are available. And then it's just the progression. And then one thing leads to another. And the more powerful the drug, the more likely you are to get hooked to it. And so that's what happened to me is at a young age. I started drinking. I absolutely loved it. And then I was like, well, I wonder what everything else does. And so then I made a commitment to myself and to anyone who was willing to listen or around me that I was going to try all of it. And that's what I did. I went on the journey to discover it all. And
that journey started with you just kind of self, but then, like you said, it turned into criminal activity.
Oh, absolutely. Without a shadow of a doubt. It's hard to be a professional drug addict without dabbling in a little bit of criminal activity. It's just, how are you going to continually stay high and not? And so without a shadow of a doubt, it took a toll on my life. And I think what started off an addiction, or what started off just casual use around friends, ended up a horribly debilitating, isolating addiction that the only way to feed the beast was to sell drugs or do whatever it took in order to make sure that I could remain high. And so luckily the gift of incarceration is a real thing. And it's a joke kind of when you think about it, but sometimes you're moving at life at such a pace and you're going so fast that you have to have someone that sets you down for a little bit in order to start thinking about what you've been doing and whether or not this is the path that you want to continue to live on. And so naturally that's what happened to me, is what happens to a lot of people, is they find Jesus in the county. So
Jesus in the county. I think that's a country song.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's if not, it should be. Somebody out there needs to write that.
Get your wife to.
It's a form of accounting.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, well, Nate, we've got you here with us as well. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, similar to Blake's. You just kind of start out when you're a teenager. It's fun. It's here and there, not so much every single day, but yeah, eventually it just becomes casual use, but it's so fun. So you do it more often. And then it just, honestly, what Blake touched on is I can relate almost 100% tit for tat exactly what he said. But yeah, it just branches off to the point to where you're doing it so much until the point where you're like, I'm going to stop. And by that time you're trying to stop, it's already a chemical, physical dependency. And then so by that point in time, like, you stop and you start feeling terrible. And so it just draws you back in. And yeah, there's so many different times out over the years or whatnot. You think, I should probably stop. But at that point, it's just not fun. Like he's talking about county, man. We all, well, I can't say all, but I definitely had to get slowed down to stop and think about my actions quite a few times. But it consumes you, consumes all your thoughts. Just quite a bit, just using all the way up until probably, 3 years ago before I finally wanted to stop. But yeah, it took a long time for me to actually realize that it was ruining my life. And finally, when your eyes get open, luckily there's men, and like in this program or whatnot, to be able to take the time to kind of preach the gospel to you a little bit to help you figure out that you do need to stop. Song as old as time, really, for guys in addiction. We're all pretty much the similar, but details are a little bit different.
Well, something also that I want to add to that is I know that me and Chris were popular in high school. I doubt Nate was, but we were hanging out with people that you wouldn't really think that everyone was in going to be in demise. I mean, I know you guys probably had this too, that you were in addiction, and then a lot of your friends were actually becoming successful. They were getting out of addiction. They were actually passing their test in college. Some of them were growing up being things like dentists and judges and lawyers and nurse anesthetists. And then all of a sudden you look up and you're the old guy at the bar, and you're like, wow, what the heck happened, man? Because like you said, 1 out of 10. So that means there's 9 people out there that made it for every one of us that landed in addiction. But the crazy thing is, you never know, because you're hanging out with the same people, you're in the same groups, you're in the same crowd. And what happens is the people that were actually making it in life, they kind of progress on about their life. And then the people that were not kind of get left behind. And then that's where you start talking about those pools of criminal activity. It's because the people that were actually doing good in life and somehow managing their recreational use, that they actually had it under control to a degree with the alcohol and things of that nature, then they continued to be successful, while people like us ended up having the gift of incarceration.
Well, we're glad for you guys, your turnaround, and you all have testimonies. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you were just sharing a moment ago, and how, you finally got it. Was there something, now that you're where you are now and you kind of look back, I know you had persons in your life who tried to reach you. As you look back, is there something that possibly could have been done, or an approach that may have been more effective as you look and see others?
I hate to say this, but loving someone to death. Parents, my father loved me, my mother loved me, but at that point, they didn't realize that I was so deep into my addiction. They wanted to love me and support me, but really it was just enabling me. And so really, tough love would have been a major factor in my life, forcing me and holding me accountable in my actions, instead of consoling me like the child that they looked at me as. You know what I mean? You've got kids, you look at your child, no matter how old they get, they're still your baby. And that's how they looked at me. And at that point, it wasn't helping me. But yeah, seeds were planted, my whole addiction, from my parents or whatnot, trying to correct me and whatnot. But really, it's just, and it hits the ear wrong, but to not let them live under your roof when they are acting like that, to kind of force them into something, to force them into a place where they are maybe not incarcerated or whatnot, but force them into a place of isolation to where they have to sober up to be able to think rationally and understand what's going on, instead of staying high the entire time or drunk the entire time. So whatever that looks like, but it's definitely a tough situation.
So the question, could you repeat that one more time? And are you talking about more of what could have happened after we were already on the wrong path, or what could have possibly happened to never get us to go down the path to begin with?
No, he actually answered it. It was more about what could his parents, and I'll be more specific now that you brought them, kind of engaged them, what could they have done? And he said that they enabled him, and they really should have been giving him tough love. So sometimes, and oftentimes, you see how, when it's like you got to make a decision. Should I make that phone call to get them the help that they need, or should I just try to love them through this? And oftentimes they don't have the capacity. Mm-hmm. They're relationally connected, but they don't have the capacity to give them what they need. It sounds like what he's saying is that if they had have given me the tough love, then maybe the back of my addiction could have been broken.
Yeah. I was going to say, we're going to take a break here in just a second, but I think where Bishop's also going, one of the things that we look at with our violence problems is it didn't start with homicide. It started multiple steps back with y'all's addiction leading to criminal activity, leading to jail, leading to these things. Could we have caught it earlier? And could there have been some intervention that would have course corrected you before it ever went there? Because I think with so many of the kids that we work with, it's Chris is here. We'll hear from him here when we come back from break. But so many of our kids, if we could catch them when they're in first, second, third grade and just acting a fool before they commit some criminal act, before they get thrown out of school, before they do something, could we divert them from ever going down that path? And that's kind of with First and 45 and these contributing factors. So we're going to talk more about this, more about recovery, hear more from these guys when we come back. First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill. Don't go anywhere. Hey guys, Drew here, and for the last 11 years, we've worked together to build the Arkansas Dream Center. And over those years, things have grown, opportunities have happened, but we've continued to focus on that mission of every Arkansan chasing their God-given dream. And for that very reason, our corporation is actually known as Every Arkansan Inc. We have two ministries that really work together in tandem to see that mission take place. We have the Arkansas Dream Center, which is going out and we're reaching out to the communities. We're in those communities with mobile trucks. We're doing after school, we're feeding, we're doing all those things you know us for doing. But in addition, we realize that the church is the answer to a lot of society's problems, and there's one on every corner. So we have City Serve that comes along the side of the church, and they provide the resources. They provide furniture and clothing and diapers and all these things to the local churches so they can reach out to their neighbors. And together, when those two start to mesh, we're going out and we're doing and we're bringing the churches alongside of them, and we're equipping and we're resourcing those churches. We can truly empower the local church with the resources they need to strengthen relationships in their communities. And that's what our vision is for Every Arkansan Inc. And we're so glad you're a part of it.
And we're back with first and 45. Again, it's time for the second quarter. Coach Fitz Hill, we're praying for him. He's over serving in Stuttgart. But we've got three great guys here tonight from Every Arkansan Recovery Ministry, Mr. Blake Polston. We've got Chris Markle. Okay.
Markle. I like Markle.
I said Markle at first, then,
Cool.
and Mr. Nate Stark. Blake, you kind of was now that you got the answer. I remember you were here once before, and you were sharing that the day that you got arrested, there was that one time when you got arrested, you began to thank the officers, the arresting officers.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I always call it the gift of incarceration, simply because of the situation they pulled me out of. I had a powerful belief in Christ, and I would have died a martyr. And the events that led me to believe in Christ were very real and very powerful. And over a span of 9 years, wasn't one day that I didn't think about it. And I knew that God had a call and a plan for my life, but I also knew that I had to submit and surrender my will to his. And I had no clue how to do that. Belief in Christ versus asking Jesus to be your Lord, they're two totally different things. And so that day in handcuffs was whenever I dedicated my life to God. And I told the officers, thank you, because I had no clue what was going to happen next. But I knew that they saved my life, and it was better than the situation that I was exiting.
I mean, I think it's really interesting. Daniel Skaggs posted on Facebook, "Truth, your parents can love you to death." Is really interesting. And I've got family members that have gone through the addiction. And I mean, I remember having conversations with my father. It's like, you got to let go. You got to cut them off. It can get worse. Yes. Cause I mean, Nate, you kind of talked when we were at dinner tonight about becoming homeless through the process. Prison, homelessness. Those are not anything any parent wants for their kid. But can you kind of just talk about that real quick, that how you got to that point and the realization, because you didn't share it like it was a scar. You shared it like it was a badge of your story.
Yeah. Well, it just got to the point to where I knew I couldn't be around my family, and the times that I would show up, they really didn't want me around. And so it got to the point to where I wasn't living right, man. I was lying, stealing. I mean, honestly, like I brought zero positivity to the table. And yes, it got to the point where, like, honestly, like, if I showed up at the house, they were calling the cops. And so I lost being able to come around my family. And then whenever I'd lose my jobs and everything that would run out, yeah, I got to the point where I was literally walking the streets of Memphis, finding, a specific bridge to get under. And it definitely, it broke me down, man. Cause I remember finally like realizing like, I can't continue living like this. But yes, it's just a huge part of my story. Cause knowing like finally realizing like I didn't want to live like that. And I knew that I was called for better. But yeah, that was a really, really hard hitting day whenever I had to actually walk back to my mother's house and speak to her and beg for forgiveness and try to get back in some good graces to start correcting my life. But yeah, no, it leads to that, man. You don't ever see yourself you'll never see yourself getting to a point of homelessness.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's not like you can just see it coming from around the corner like that. It hits you eventually. Like
it's not on anyone's bucket list.
Right, for sure.
So, hey, and the eye candy in the room, if you're not watching on video, you've really missed out. We've got Chris Markle here. Chris, do you want to just kind of chime in with your story?
Yeah. So my story,
and ladies, he is single. So.
It's
looks like an American hero.
It's a lot like both of theirs. It started out young. My parents, they got divorced when I was about 13. And so my mom was working 2 jobs. I've got 2 brothers. And so we had a lot of freedom. And so, I started drinking a lot in high school, smoking weed, using drugs. And it's like Blake said, it seemed like everyone was doing it. And it was fun. It was cool. It was a thing to do. But the difference is for me, and I maybe didn't even realize it then, but that was my main thing. My main thing was the drinking and finding drugs. So it's like while everybody else had these plans and they were trying to achieve certain things, and that's something that we all just kind of got together and did. They veered more toward what they were after in life, their accomplishments with either college, work, a family, where my main thing drifted the other direction, and it was just the alcohol. And so over time, there started becoming separation between kind of the friend group I had, and I started getting in trouble, got that first DUI. Then I got that second one. And so now I'm finding myself getting in trouble with the law, losing jobs, losing relationships, having to start over quite a bit. I felt like there was a lot of starting over I'd have to do. You would kind of pull yourself together, for a little while, but then, I would mess up somehow with either getting in trouble because of the drinking, losing the job. And so that was just a cycle that I went through. And I went through that cycle up until I finally ended up going to a recovery program. And for me, that's where I met Blake at. And it was John 3:16 Ministries. And that was great. Got sober. And so, found Jesus. Had always been a believer, but just wasn't practicing that relationship with him. So life really turned around for me. And life was great for like 5 years. But the kicker of that is I let the alcohol come back in, and it destroyed everything. And it was so much faster this time, and so much more brutal and dark. And it cost me everything the last time, a marriage, career, house, just everything super fast. And up until where I literally just drove it till the brakes fell off pretty much. I got to where I had no money left, nowhere to live, no vehicle. Like Nate said, walking the streets for a few days until a stranger helped me and got me in contact with Blake, and I got back up, got up here to Little Rock, and got into EA recovery. But it was just a vicious cycle like that. And I think that when you're young, you think that 1 out of 10, it's not going to be me. It's not me. You don't, it's never going to be me. I don't look at it like that. But it can be you.
Talk a little bit about, because you're kind of speaking to the risk factor, because you said, hey, I was just hanging out with the other kids. Mine started in high school.
Mhm.
I was just doing what everybody else was doing that was in my circle. But your outcome, all right, everybody else didn't end up at the same place, which really says that there's risk. All right. Everybody can't have the intake that others can have. And so there's a risk factor. Same thing with, this fentanyl, where persons are no longer here because they took that one hit and it took them out. Kind of speak to the risk factor and the effect that it's had. I mean, you listed a laundry list of things that has affected you in your life.
Yeah. I mean, it's super high risk, and it didn't turn out bad for everybody. But I think for me, if I'm looking back, it's just the fact that I lived for the party where other people were just kind of doing it on the side. Now, I didn't know that starting out. I mean, it could have been anyone, but for me, once I realized I liked it, I wanted to keep doing it. And I liked it. I mean, from the beginning, it was super fun to me. It was something that, I wanted to do. So partying it's just what I wanted to do. And I also think I want to talk about what you said earlier, going back to, is there anything that could have been done? I do feel like living in a household with just a mother, I feel like maybe at a younger age, had there been a male figure, a mentor of some sort, to keep me on track a little bit more, I feel like that probably could have played a factor into me just running wild, kind of making my own rules.
Social determinants.
Bro, it shouldn't be surprising that I had the exact same thought. That's what I was going to say earlier, is that a 2-parent household where both parents were active participants in the raising. And in the instance that wasn't the case, if there would have been another strong male figure from a church or somebody that would have shepherded and helped guide into, an adult, because I mean, that's a hard time, man, for a 15-year-old kid to try to figure out how to become an adult without any positive examples around them. I mean,
you've got 2 daughters, Blake, and Markle, you're close to those 2 daughters. I don't know, Nate, how close you are to the girls, but it's like there's Blake and Ashley, and there's times where Blake's got to step in and take care of business, and there's times where Ashley's got to step into business. There's time where both have stepped into business, and then there's time where the village, that's a Markle, steps into business. And now, Markle, you're working with children at the church and different things like that. It's where the church has a place where they can step in. We always talk about when we were kids, man, your parents signed you up for all the VBSs. You were always in and around church community. You had your parent. So anytime there's one piece missing, that's that puzzle piece where Satan can sneak in, where that snake, I mean, you hear those stories of the snake getting in the house. That's where the snake can get in the house and strike so many young people because those pieces are missing. And when we share the stats about the single parentness in our country, man, it's a real issue. Mm-hmm. Blake, you and I were talking today about a young man that we've both known for years that just had a baby. He's 18, girlfriend is 17, and the house where girlfriend's living and all that, they're starting to push him out. And it's like, our society has told a lot of men, you're not needed anymore. You're obsolete. We don't want you around. The government programs are like, well, the man's around, we're not going to fund it. There's this Satan tendency of our world to say we can do this on our own, but that's not God's best.
No, not at all. It's such an important thing for men to be involved in other young men's lives. Fitz, or Coach, he was telling me whenever he was in Israel and he was taking his grandkids to a birthday party, and that it was a little boy's birthday party. And so all the men were the ones that brought their sons to the birthday party. And he said it was just a trip, like to watch it happen, how the men were actively participating because that's their culture. And you're talking about multiple roles, man. My wife is phenomenal whenever it comes to the mothering of our children and making sure that there's traditions that are set, that are followed, making sure that there's biblical training at a young age that's brought into the household. But then there are other things that a father is equipped to do and to handle. Absolutely. And the older the child gets, the more the father is going to be a necessity and a staple. And so I think that it's something that is the social determinant that we have with mass parenthood that's now no longer in existence. I think that's a huge problem that leads to a lot of violence.
Absolutely. Hey, guys, it is halftime here at First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill. We are going to be right back, so don't go anywhere. We got more of this going on.
As a former football coach, knowing the engagement that takes place on the football field, the basketball courts, the track, baseball, outside of extracurricular activity, META is the best academic curriculum I've seen for the oftentimes socially challenged student. And glad to have a pilot program going here now with Hamilton Learning Academy, as well as juvenile detention facility, to inspire, grow hope to a population of kids who sometimes don't believe that in the United States that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is for them. And so this opportunity allows them to see that, to feel that, and to engage in that, and to leave here thinking that I can do something that maybe they didn't think they could do prior to enrolling in the META 24 program.
All right, who's the CFO? Yeah. Come on up. Give the CFO a round of applause. All right, for the marketing promotion team.
My name is Shania, and I make this pillow. It's a baby pillow for babies. It can be for a boy or for a girl. It's saying, be what you want to be. I really want to make a side hustle of this and give pillows to the hospital so you don't get good rest. So soft pillows like this.
I want to 3D print some stuff that will help us in the world. I would love to print 3D houses to help architects build real houses, because there's a lot of people in the world that homeless right now, and I feel like if I'm able to print 3D houses, I feel like architects can make more houses faster.
And we are back with First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill. Guys, it has been a great talking about this. And I think when we look at this, we kind of talked about 50% of kids have tried illicit drugs. 84% have tried alcohol. And we talked about that 1 in 10 chance of becoming addicted to alcohol. That's just alcohol. The other drugs and all that and all this. And you three are all living examples of guys that fell in that 1 in 10 trap. And I think that it's so interesting to look at it, because it's each one of you's path was a little bit different, but you were all susceptible. And when we look at our kids that are out there, Nate, you have not worked as much with kids as Markle and Blake and Ashley have in a lot of the context that we have, but we see so many of these young kids growing up, and they're the statistics that we talked about. They're the single parent households. They're the dads who are incarcerated. They're the poverty driven households. So they don't necessarily have what everyone else has. They're the households that the kids are hungry. They don't know where their next meal is coming from, which creates a level of instability. And then when you start to look at those things, and you start to look at the impact of prison on so many of the kids that we work with, because it's can you imagine, Blake, your daughters growing up knowing that you were behind bars?
No.
And so many of our kids that we work with, that's their story. Dad's behind bars. It becomes more normalized when we look at that, and we start to look at these kids, and we start to say, man, why are they turning out the way they are? And it's like, well, we just stacked every one of these chips on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is that when you look at it, none of those chips were theirs. They were their parents' decisions. They were people around them decisions. They were the stats that they were born in. And all of a sudden, if you're starting the 100-meter dash, but everyone else gets to start 5 seconds before you, and you look down the track and you're like, man, they're already halfway down there. And why do I even keep going? Why do I even start in a lot of these kids' stories? And I kind of want to start to bring this home. Blake, you shared that it was that moment of incarceration and that holy moment with God that triggered you to say, I got to change. Nate, Chris, do one of y'all want to kind of share, more detail? We've heard Blake's in detail story before. More about y'all's story of that. I don't want to even say aha moment, but that moment where the light shines down, that Saul on the road to Tarsus moment for you guys. Because I think it's important to understand that if we want to turn lives around, we got to know where in the world we got to meet people.
Yeah. Mine was summer of 22, almost 3 years ago exactly. My father and my daughter's mother, and also my daughter was in the truck, but they found me near death on top of some trash, close to overdosing at a random gas station in Birmingham, Alabama. And I pretty much was given the ultimatum. I was on the run, and I was just living foul. And my father and my daughter's mother pretty much gave me the choice. It said, turn yourself in and get some help, or you won't have anything to do with your family. And so, my daughter was 9 months old at the time. And looking back at how impactful my father was at that point in my life, in my later years, when he was heavily involved in my life, I knew that I needed to be a father. And so it was really pulling at me and my heartstrings, even though I had no idea how I was going to do it. I knew I had to start walking towards that direction. And I turned myself in. And then I actually went to John 3:16 Ministries after I got out of jail, because my family would not let me come back around until I had gotten some help. But finally, when faced with the hard decisions of being homeless again and cut off from everybody 100%, or doing the hard work and figuring out what needed to be done, that was really an eye-opener for me. And
yeah, so for me, I had I talked about earlier, I had been sober for about 5 years, and then I'd relapsed again. But I'd say the first aha moment before I'd ever gotten sober, I sobered up for a little while and was trying to do good. And I decided I would have a few drinks. And so I went out and had a few drinks, and had dinner, and then we ended up going out on the town, and I woke up the next morning in another state in jail and couldn't remember how I got there. And I had drove. Yeah.
You drove?
So I was in Fayetteville.
Oh, wow.
And I woke up in Tulsa County Jail the next day. And that was a pretty big aha moment for me. And so that's when I went to John 3 and got sober for the first time. And then after I relapsed after that 5 years, this most recent, it's when I found myself homeless, with nothing left. And, after having a taste of the good life, after God taking you and blessing your obedience over those years of serving him and being there's just that rebuilding process and getting a taste of, man, how good life can be sober. And then just kind of throwing that away, and then just having that moment of clarity of realizing, like, man, this is not what I want. And I remember just breaking down and just crying out for help, Lord, just give me one more chance. And he did. And that's what I got to Blake and started this new journey. And now he's blessed me with getting to stick around the community that he placed me in. After I got out of EA recovery, he didn't take me further out of the community. He grew the community I was in, and now I get to work at Every Arkansan with the kids, which is a passion of mine. Get to work with New Life, with the kid life there, which is great too. So it's just, he's opened up all these doors for me to stick within this community that's helped me grow and rebuild. And so I'm blessed that I get to do that.
And I think it's really interesting because you're talking about community, and all of you guys, your first go round was at John 3.
Yep.
And then for you two, y'all ended up at Every Arkansan. Blake, did you end up at a second, or did the first run through?
No, one and done.
One and done.
That's why I'm the director.
Okay. Yeah. But so much of the time we look at our kids and we say it's the community that they're involved with. It's the relationships that they have. At Every Arkansan, we say whoever spends the most time with a person will win the battle of influence. And for so many of our kids, they fall into that trap of the wrong influence. Kids that are just going down that wrong path, and they're just like, man, those are my friends, those are my buddies. How important is the right community to staying sober?
It's everything. Yeah. That's the primary reason that I can safely say that I've made it this long. Is went from John 3:16 Ministries, stayed there on staff for 2.5 years, went and lived with Chris, because Chris and I, we've known each other for over a decade.
In a minute.
Chris was in my wedding, and so we've met.
Beautiful wedding.
Yeah, it was an amazing wedding. And so we've known one another for a very long time. And so we lived together in aftercare housing in Poplar Bluff, Missouri for a year. And so that's 3.5 years in. And then I moved to Conway after I met my bride.
Shout out to Ashley Polston.
Shout out to Ashley Polston.
Hometown of Ashley
Bless her
Polston.
heart.
Yeah,
Bless her heart.
Poplar Bluff, Missouri, hometown of Ashley Polston. There should be a sign. I think there should be. But they got married, and to the ultimate accountability partner, to anyone who's met my wife, like she's the greatest accountability partner that God's ever made. And I think it's because God knew that I needed it. Mm-hmm. And so she's been a rock, and she's definitely kept me from slipping back into old ways. It would have never happened by me going out and using illicit drugs, but I would have ended up drinking at some point probably, and it would have likely been with pastors. I mean, it would have been with other people that didn't have problems and didn't really understand my problem, but God knew that I needed a strong person in my life that could hold me to that level of accountability that I needed. And then from there, I've just always been a part of New Life and been a part of recovery. And so it's been the community that I've kept all these years that have allowed me to continue to walk out the purpose that God's called me to.
Blake, talk a minute about you. We talked about, and shout out to Ashley. She's on. We see her dropping in the chat. But
I need you, boo.
The two of you kind of lead. You get a chance. She lead the women, you lead the men. Mm-hmm. Talk about what that's like for you guys, having your own journeys, but now you're able to look back and see men like Mark and Chris with that transformation.
Yeah, it's amazing. We do not want to do anything else ever. It's 100%. My wife, whenever I met her, she was a youth pastor at a church in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And the lady that introduced us, she wasn't intentionally introducing us. She brought both of us into her office independently so that she could recruit us to teach Bible to kids who were incarcerated. Wow. And so, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and these things will be added unto you. And so that's where I met my bride, was trying to teach Bible to kids who were incarcerated. And so both of us have always had a strong passion and a strong desire to see people in freedom. And a lot of my wife's desire is based on the fact that she wants to see the kids restored. And we know all too well that if you can get the parents restored, that's the easiest way to get the kids on a trajectory in which that they're set up for success. And so that's whenever she decided that she wanted to start restoring the parents. And both of us have always had the same vision and the same journey that we're on. And I couldn't think of anything else that we'd rather do.
6:45 already. When you're having a good time, time flies. Hey, we're going to take a quick break on this quarter, and we're going to come into the fourth quarter, finish this thing strong. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill.
Black men have so many different problems, so many different issues. Homicide rate, high incarceration rate, fatherless homes. What is America going to do about it?
What are we going to do about it? Yeah, what are we going to do about it? When I say we, I'm talking to black men. I'm asking us, what are we going to do about issues that negatively impact black men and boys to a greater degree than other demographics? Everybody knows about the homicide epidemic in this country regarding black men and boys. While comprising only 6% of the nation's population, we account for 50% of the nation's homicide victims. So what are we going to do about it? Here's another disturbing reality. While making up only 6% of the nation's population, we're about 40% of the nation's prison population. In fact, 1 in 3 black males are projected to go to jail in their lifetime. Again, I ask, what are we going to do about it? Collectively, black men have the means to solve these problems. We just don't have the mind to do so. And means without the mind.
And great conversation on tonight. We got Blake, we got Chris, we got Nate, we got Phil, and for a moment, we got a big feeding, just a great weight on your shoulders, taking care of the kids for the summer. Kind of speak to that a little bit. You got a big number of kids.
We got all the kids in the city that we feel responsible for. We've got our Little Rock facility that'll feed. They'll have full day program, breakfast, lunch, but it's almost like VBS all day long in our building. But the majority of the kids that we're seeing, and Chris actually, this is his first summer on that team, our mobile team, takes our trucks out. We do VBS on the sidewalks in neighborhoods all over Central Arkansas. So we're feeding kids. We're sharing the gospel with kids. This summer, we're talking 10 Commandments. And so we're just talking about how to live life right. And the hope is that we're not only feeding them with the physical nourishment they need. There's 500,000 kids that rely on free and reduced lunches here in Arkansas. And when school's out, those lunches disappear. We want to meet those needs. But more importantly, our heart is to see them receive and become all that God has for them. And that's why we run programs. It looks like a mobile VBS out on the streets every day. Our teams are out there. It's a beautiful thing to see how that kind of works and the relationships and all those things. And I think that kind of leads me into something that I was thinking when we were talking about community in this last quarter. You're the pastor of a church. Blake and I have been part of New Life for a little bit. And I mean, how important in recovery, how important in this process does the local church, what should their role be, and how important is it to supporting the families that are left behind and the men and women that are going through this process?
Well, I might go off like a bottle rocket on this one because this is a passion point of mine. And one of the things that the local church is called to do is to reach out to those who are broken to see them restored. And starting back to the prevention, well, the other day I was in a room with a bunch of directors of Christ-centered recovery facilities from across the state of Arkansas, and everyone was talking about like what it would be like if we could do prevention. And instantaneously, I just said, man, I want to challenge you guys to think about this. I said, if you want to do youth prevention, I said, you need to go hug your youth pastor. I said, because there's no greater vessel on planet Earth to keep kids out of trouble than your youth pastor. They're the ones that are going into the schools, that are meeting with the people, that are going to, be chaplains of the football team, that are really helping steward these kids and their time and to keeping them from running amok, so that they can have their selves and their lives plugged into something that's positive, that can attach themselves to purpose so that they can live a productive life. And so I think the church starts off with the preventive mechanism of keeping kids from ever moving into this to begin with. But then as far as the aftercare goes and the community, it's where are people going to find an entire new life? Because you can't go back to your old life. You can't go back to your old friends. You can't go back to the rhythms and the habits that were so destructive in your life to begin with. So where are you going to go? Church. The church has to be a vessel. And here's the thing. Some people may agree, some people may not. I don't think 100% of the churches out there are specifically called into addiction recovery. I think that there's some churches that are called into foster care heavy. I think some churches have just a passion to feed kids. I think that some people have the passion and the talents and the gift sets to be construction workers. They go fix, overhangs for widows whenever trees and straight line windstorms blow through. I think that there are a lot of people out there that are called to a lot of different things. However, collectively, as the Big C church, we have to be able to tackle this, and we have to be able to provide that space and that environment in which that we can help people get the help that they need and connect to organizations like Every Arkansan that can help resource families and be very specific in what we do. But then after the family receives that recovery and that restoration, well, just like Lazarus, whenever he was raised from the tomb, then Jesus told him, now unbind him. So he had been resurrected and he had been raised from the dead, but then he called on the onlookers to actually help unbind him from his grave clothes. And I think that's what the church's job is to do, is to help polish people after they receive their resurrection and to be a body of believers that they can do life with in order to start that entire new chapter of their life in their friend group.
Well, Blake and I were part of a meeting today, and Rick Bizette was talking, and we were talking about, man, the time is now. We've got to get bold in realizing that, man, the time's not tomorrow. The time is now, today. But it takes me back to the point that so many of us have read the stories in the Bible and studied the Bible and heard the pastors talk and all that, but we've never experienced the resurrection. And this is one of those moments that every Christian ought to be looking at you three guys and saying, this is the resurrection. It took you dying. I mean, in some senses, a almost physical death, but the metaphorical dying to that sin, dying to that addiction, dying to that to become the new life, to be resurrected in who he is. We oftentimes look at baptisms and it's like it's meaningless to us. You just dipped him in water. But the premise, the show is that when Jesus was baptized, the Holy Spirit came down in the form of a dove, and there was a total transformation in that moment. We've got to have a death to have a resurrection. We've got to have chaos to have that miracle. And this is one of the things that I wish more pastors would realize, is that if your church is made up of people that are putting on the show, that are living out life with no brokenness, no hurt, there's no room in your church for the miracles that God has in store. And that's the thing that builds our faith. That's the thing that builds who we are, but it's also the thing that is going to build up the body. Because the truth is, these issues that we talk about on this radio, the death of a child. I've not lost a child, but I can't even imagine. The death of a spouse or a loved one to senseless violence. These are the things that, man, we got to have the full armor of God on when these things happen. If we don't, man, how can we properly love on them? And so it takes looking at what you got in front of you, the brokenness and all of that, to build up that faith, because, man, this stuff is real, this pain and this hurt and all of that. And I think it's just a tremendous opportunity for all churches to get in the game and look at this.
There's such a connection between witnessing a resurrection and faith. And I think a lot of people, what they do is, instead of getting in the game, but they wait until their faith is built up to where then they get in the game. But in fact, it's quite the opposite. Like, if you'll get in the game, that's when your faith will be built up, because God will show you these miracles and he'll show you these stories and he'll show you his resurrection power. And whenever you just take that step, man, of faith, then God will meet you right there. And a lot of people are out there looking for ways that they can get involved and ways that they can, be more active in the kingdom. They want to be more of a tool and they want to be more useful. Well, what I'm telling you is that if you'll find where God's working, if you'll jump right in the middle of it, then it will be no time before God will start revealing himself to you. And then he will make it incredibly clear to what it is that he has called you to do whenever you start serving and you take the first step to get in.
Yeah. And once again, I mean, I look at also the opportunities, because it's, we had Skaggs on the radio talking about his opportunity to serve back. You got you guys, both of you guys have capacities that you're serving back. Chris is full-time ministry now, which is something that's changed. I mean, you kind of had gone part-time and then full-time into this. Nate, you're still in the part-time. You're working a full-time secular job, but the experiences that God put you through, you're stepping into using them for the glory of his kingdom. And I think that's the other thing that the church could use more of, is people that are real live examples of that resurrection, of that brokenness, whether it's full-time ministry, part-time ministry, or whatever, because there is always someone else. And I'm thinking of a man in our church right now at our campus that is surrounded by guys going through recovery, surrounded by pastors, serving on a daily. He drinks. And he's got a problem with it. And this is an opportunity that I don't know that Marius or I, who've been teetotalers our whole life, have what it takes to reach him. But guys like you do. And the church needs all the broken pieces that have been restored and resurrected in order to see this change. And our community, more than ever, needs it, for the broken families, for the broken children, for the broken just people that are all over our city, that they are at that crossroads of, man, I'm going to live for myself. I'm going to keep going down that path, and it's going to lead to destruction. It's going to lead to imprisonment. It's going to lead to death. Exactly. Satan came to kill, steal, and destroy. Or the opposite of that is salvation. We're going to bring about life. And that's what First and 45 is all about. We know what the bad side is, what the negative outcome is. Now, how do we step in the game, and how do we step up and say, it's time for change. It's time for doing something about it. Guys, I want to tell you, thank you for joining us tonight. It's been an honor and a pleasure just to have both of you in here, and you too, Blake. But we got to head out for the night. Once again, Coach is in Stuttgart. Be praying for him tonight. And Bishop, do you mind just taking us out in a word of prayer?
God, thank you for Chris. Thank you for Nate. Thank you for Blake. Thank you for the hearts that they have and the turnaround, the testimonials that you've given them, and help them, God, to continue to be able to share their testimony, that others may be redeemed as well. We thank you for a great night, and we thank you for all of our listeners and viewers. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Pastor Drew and Bishop Fred is sponsored by Every